So in terms of what we intend to present on today, we were going to start off with Dan doing a presentation focusing on sudden oak death, just to set the stage a little bit about what motivated county parks to identify the forest health grant projects and the initiatives that we'll be undertaking this year. And then I'll go into a presentation I have that has a bit more information on the project specifics.
Thanks, Hannah. I will get started here. Hope everyone can see my screen. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Dan Krug. I'm the arborist for San Mateo County Parks. And I'm going to run through this presentation fairly quickly because I know Hannah has a lot to talk about as well. And it'll provide you all more time for questions at the end, should you have any. So sudden oak death, what is it? It's a serious disease that affects oaks in California, which is caused by the pathogen Phytophthora ramorum. Phytophthora ramorum is originally from Vietnam and Southeast Asia and was introduced to the area in the mid-90s through infected nursery stock. Ground zero was in, unfortunately, Scotts Valley. The disease cycle for this pathogen is that spreads rapidly in wet seasons, particularly in late spring when we have wet springs. And the native hosts of primary concern are California bay oak and tan oak on county park property. Initial infection that we would spot in our parks would be on California bay. And the sporangia, the infecting bodies from California bay can infect several host species, secondary host species, including those oaks and madrones, redwood. The sporangia spread through rain splash and wind dispersal, but they're very heavy and don't move very far from their parent tree. So it takes several years before you end up having widespread infection. The leaves on bay must remain wet for up to 6 to 12 hours, depending on environmental conditions. And this is what the infections on bay trees typically look like. The point of the leaf that hangs down the lowest is generally where the infections occur. Now, typically when you see bay, they're hanging with their points facing down, which is why the images on the left-hand side are in that fashion. On the right-hand side, those leaves are more on their side, but the water still collects towards the tip. There's a black necrotic line where the infection has caused the leaf material to die back. It will typically be brown during a first year of infection and black or dark gray if it's an older infection. The lesions on infected oak are typically found at the base of larger diameter trees. This is because the bark furrows allow a location for rainwater to stay even when it's warmer and dry. And so you have greater infections on those trees versus smaller diameter or younger oak species. The silver lining here, though, is that sudden oak death is a dead-end species on true oaks, which just means that there's little to no development of the pathogen from one oak to another species. Now, it's not really much of a silver lining, but once an oak is infected, at least, it doesn't move much from there. What's really unfortunate is tan oak are a dual vector. They are able to house the pathogen on the leaf and obtain trunk infections, and they can also infect themselves, not just other trees. The transmission from bay laurels to oaks, again, primarily happens during wet springs when temperatures are between 70 to 80 degrees, daytime high temperatures between 70 to 80 degrees that provides optimum germination for those the sporangias. And the incubation time on an oak is generally 24 hours. Because of that, we typically see higher infection rates in north-facing slopes or very steep canyons where we don't really have solarization and warming earlier in the day. This is what the inside or the bark, interior bark would look like after infection. You get a line of necrosis, which is the disease clogging up the cambial layer, the vascular system for all intents and purposes. So the trees are not able to translocate water and nutrients from the canopy into the root system and vice versa. These necrotic areas will eventually expand and can girdle the tree by themselves, or more frequently, multiple infection points will eventually merge and girdle the tree, effectively choking it. What's typically very easy to see with sudden oak death infections are the secondary pests. Fungal pathogens, you might see these hiking in either Huddart or Wunderlich. These are pathogens which will be more readily infecting on the trees because of the wounds created by insect pests, which I'll talk about next. The development of the fungal pathogens on anonul hypoxylon falciparum or hypoxylon cankers, or commonly called cramp balls, those black balls on the left-hand side there, weaken the tree and will cause spontaneous failures. Another common pathogen is Philenius gilvus. Secondary pests, which create wounding that allow those fungal pathogens to enter the tree, are things like cambial borers or bark beetles. On the right-hand image there, we've got a nautical borer, which is a native insect pest. Very often, bark beetles and borers are in our oak forests and actively on the trees, but they're not generally causing issues unless the trees are stressed or infected with a disease or pathogen or impacted by drought. Here we see infection by or infestation of ambrosia beetles. What you're really looking at is sawdust or frass created by the beetles as they tunnel deep into the internal wood and push out that sawdust, so that that's all over the moss that's growing on that oak. Decline that we'll often see in the trees. Old leaves will drop off, but honestly, will sometimes stay on the tree for many years. But the trees actually look like they suddenly die, but could take 2 to 5 years for that to occur. Large dead limbs or the entire tree may become more prone for failure. What's unfortunate, though, is that there are other diseases which appear like sudden oak death, like cryptocline canker or anthracnose, which are foliar diseases. In closer inspection or sampling the leaf material and culturing the pathogens on those leaves can provide more precise diagnosis. These are examples of what ambrosia beetles and cambial borers, the kind of damage that they will do, along with the fungal pathogens. So if you look at these cross-sectional cuts of stumps, you see the tunneling that's done by these insect pests, and you can actually see the sponginess of the caused by the fungal pathogen. On the left-hand image, the whole right side of that tree, and then 70% of the stump that has all the borer hole damage on the right-hand side. Sudden oak death killed trees commonly fail. due to the combination of these pests and pathogens. So management for these diseases or infected trees it's common to remove the infected oak and tan oak, which are standing dead and exhibit signs of disease and threats or hazards to the general public in high use areas or high use trails. Another common management technique is to remove smaller diameter bay laurel, which again are the vector for the disease. And generally, if we want to preserve high value oaks which have not already been infected, removal of oaks anywhere from bays within 40 to 60 feet of those high value oaks is recommended. If pruning is to be done on trees infected by sudden oak death or high value trees which are not infected by sudden oak death, I should say, it's best to schedule that between Thanksgiving and New Year's because there's very low risk for infection by the time the pathogens are active in the spring. Best management practices also are to keep all chip debris on site. This helps reduce the spread of disease from one area to another, especially when we're dealing with management of bay tree debris. The oak material is less problematic because, or at least with true oaks again, because it's a dead end host, but tan oak material could infect other otherwise uninfected areas if the material is moved. Sanitation is very important. So when you're out hiking, it's great to sanitize your boots to prevent incidental spread of sudden oak death from one area to another. Same thing with driving in areas where sudden oak death is known to be, cleaning off vehicles in between, moving from one area to the other is preferred. What's more important than spraying with isopropyl alcohol or bleach and other sanitizers is actually to get the large chunks of soil and debris from your boots before moving on. And if you can leave that material on site where you're located, that's for the best. Very quickly, I want to talk about monitoring the spread of sudden oak death and the program called Sod Blitz, which some of you might be familiar with. The Sod Blitz is a citizen science data collection effort that identifies, maps, and monitors the spread of Phytophthora ramorum within the landscape. Data collection is typically on bay leaves or oak leaves, which are showing symptoms of disease. These programs are typically done in a 2 to 3 day window. Very commonly, the Peninsula Sod Blitz is done during May. These samples are then sent to the UC Berkeley pathology lab, and they verify if the samples indeed did have sudden oak death. Results are posted in the fall, and then we can use that to help make management strategies. Since I started working for the department, we've had 3 sod blitzes, 3 in Edgewood Park, 2018, 2019, and 2020. And then last year, or 2019 and 2020, once in Huddart and once in Wunderlich parks. The data that we received back from Huddart Park in 2019 was inconclusive. The sampling day was very wet, and it was determined that the samples were contaminated with other pathogens, which did not allow potentially infected material to culture properly. And last year, 15 samples were taken within Wunderlich, and we had a 70% infection rate for those samples.
Oh.
These are some great resources to be familiar with to learn more about sudden oak death. And I'm going to give you a quick plug for the Sod Blitz this year. I was supposed to write down the dates, but it's coming up, and I can send that information to Kim. I would love assistance in collecting materials and sending that to the Berkeley lab. It's very simple. You do an online course that takes about 45 minutes to learn how to collect the materials properly. And you go out socially distanced with your sampling pack, and we get some great data. Feel free to email me for more information. And Kim, you're more than welcome to share my information. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Kim, I'm not sure if you want to spend a few minutes on questions for this presentation before I start into mine, or if we want to save it all for the end.
Does anybody have any pressing questions about Dan's presentation at this time? Otherwise, I think it's good to leave it all to the end.
Great.
Yes, I think it's okay to go ahead, Hannah. Thanks.
Okay, is everyone able to see the slideshow?
Mm-hmm. I can see it.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so, sorry, one sec. Sorry about that. I'm just trying to have it set up so that I can see my notes and the presentation at the same time, but I feel like I'm just getting the screen with the slideshow. One second.
In the meantime, Hannah, maybe I could talk about the boot scraper project that we're working on.
Yeah.
A few minutes. Okay. So hi everyone, it's Catherine. I just wanted to share that the interpretive team is working on some boot scraper information and locations for a variety of our parks. So we are, I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Developing some interpretive panels to put up alongside boot scrapers in a variety of parks. And we have a few boot scraper locations for Huddart and Wunderlich parks, and those will be going up at a variety of trailheads. So basically it's just a boot scraper like pictured in this interpretive panel, and it will educate people about the need to scrape your boots to prevent spread of sudden oak death and invasive plant seeds. So that's coming up. If you have any recommendations for different locations, please send that on to Kim and we can try to coordinate where best to install these. Thanks.
Okay, great. So thanks, Catherine. Sorry for the delay there. Is everyone seeing the title slide? Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to spend this presentation introducing the forest health and fuel reduction projects for Huddart and Wunderlich County Parks that are going to be started this year, and just give a little bit of background on the goals and objectives of the projects and what to expect at the parks when the work is underway. And so in order to introduce the project, I wanted to spend a few minutes just setting the stage for what we mean by forest health and how this concept of healthy forests helps guide our decision-making and our overall objectives for doing this type of work. So the images that you can see here are good representations of the forest conditions that we're used to seeing in the parks. So in the top image, this is shows a mixture of plenty of dense understory scrub and trees, while the bottom image is more representative of a managed forest where there has been work to reduce the understory vegetation density. And so I wanted to go into why we want to do this type of management work. So when we think of forest density, well, what we see in present day forests are usually representative of less than ideal ecological conditions. Historically, natural disturbance, things like large grazing herds or low intensity fire were frequent and would promote regeneration and regrowth in forests or natural succession cycles. And so this type of disturbance is actually a really good thing. But with human intervention or pressures on open space due to surrounding urban areas, this can reduce or eliminate this type of natural disturbance. And so what we see are very dense forest stands with an overgrowth of trees and shrubs and lots of competition for resources like soil nutrients or water or light. We have forests that are more susceptible to disease or pests like Dan had discussed. And we also consider these forests somewhat stagnant. They're often at their carrying capacity in terms of how much growth there can be. And there isn't a lot of opportunities for new diversity or change in the forest structure. So by doing the type of forest management work planned, the result is reduced competition for resources. There's more opportunity for the retained trees or plants to grow and mature. It triggers regeneration and regrowth in the understory species, and it creates a patchiness and heterogeneity in the forest age and structure. It also benefits wildlife by creating movement corridors and foraging habitat. Another benefit of doing understory vegetation thinning is also that it provides benefits from a community safety or fuel reduction standpoint. So you're likely familiar with the concept of shaded fuel breaks, like the work that occurred at Kings Mountain Road in Huddart Park. But the goal is that by reducing understory vegetation density while retaining mature trees in the upper canopy, the conditions are more conducive for wildfire risk reduction. So in the event that a wildfire should occur, the shaded fuel breaks help slow the spread of fire, reduce the likelihood that the fire reaches the forest canopy and kind of gets out of control, and also allows for better access to these areas for emergency fire response and suppression efforts that would further limit the spread of the fire. So as I mentioned, historically fires, especially low intensity fires, have been a regular and important part of forest ecology, and that there is a distinction between what can be considered a good fire versus a damaging fire. So a good fire would be one that is low intensity, consumes understory vegetation or debris, stays out of the canopy, and promotes vegetation regeneration and natural cycles of forest succession. And should a wildfire occur, it would be our hope that the work we're doing and that, that the fire itself would behave in this type of way so that our management actions can help promote this type of fire behavior. Alternatively, what we consider a damaging fire is a high severity fire that reaches into the upper canopy and can result in much higher tree mortality. It takes much longer for forests to regenerate from this type of fire and is more representative of what we observed in recent years, especially in the state of California. So by doing understory vegetation thinning, we're reducing ladder fuels, which are things like trees or shrubs or vines that grow up tree trunks. And if these fuels are burning, it could result in the canopy igniting. Other benefits of this work are that we are actively addressing infestations of invasive species like broom, eucalyptus, and acacia. We're also working to reduce the effects of sudden oak death by removing these vector trees like California bay or tan oak, and also removing dead trees that have been affected or killed by sudden oak death as well. So this will hopefully help with limiting the ongoing spread of this pathogen throughout the park. And lastly, before we start getting into the specifics of our projects, another benefit is increased carbon storage or carbon sequestration. So as I mentioned, forest thinning and reducing competition for resources actually provides a benefit in terms of carbon storage. The retained trees now have more resources available to be able to grow larger. Redwoods are kind of the world champion of trees for carbon storage, which translates as above ground biomass. A mature or old growth redwood can store nearly 3 times as much carbon as a younger or second growth redwood tree. And so although redwoods are significant in their carbon storage capacity, the same concept applies to all tree species. A mature oak tree would store more carbon than a younger, smaller oak. For our particular projects, for Huddart and Wunderlich, it's been calculated that around 3,500 metric tons of carbon will be sequestered throughout the life of the project, which is roughly equivalent to the amount of carbon that 675 Americans produce in a year. And so our projects for Huddart and Wunderlich, San Mateo County Parks is working in partnership with the San Mateo Resource Conservation District to implement this forest health and fuel reduction project. County Parks staff, the Natural Resource Program, we had identified the need for this work based on the declining forest health in the parks and a lot of sudden oak death affected stands. And that the fact that there are high fuel risks and high concern for wildfire hazards in this region. And we began working with the San Mateo RCD to pursue funding opportunities for the work. And so the San Mateo RCD was successful in being awarded a grant from CAL FIRE and is jointly funded by the California Climate Investments Group as well. And they have been managing the project and will be leading the efforts to oversee the work through to completion. Just a little bit about the grant itself. CAL FIRE is a grant program that they have which aims to fund active restoration and forest management activities, promote forest resiliency, mitigate climate change, and protect communities from wildfire risk. Much of the funding also comes from the California Investments Group, which is a cap and trade dollars program, and they aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. As a visual as well, and for context for why CAL FIRE also considers this work of high value and high priority, is that Huddart and Wunderlich are both situated in an area that is classified as a very high fire hazard severity based on their mapping assessment. So if you can see my cursor, more or less it's roughly this area, which is shown as like the pinkish red. And this is based on factors such as fuel types, the vegetation type, the terrain, and the type of weather conditions that might lead to wildfire. I also briefly wanted to highlight this resource that CAL FIRE has published for those who might be interested in learning more about the techniques and approaches that CAL FIRE implements or recommends for doing fuel reduction work, and what the benefits are of these different techniques for fuel reduction. So if you are interested, I do encourage you to read and learn more about the types of treatment approaches that are in the toolbox. And this is a great resource. Just to highlight as well, the equipment that you see in the far right image is a masticator. And this has a mounted tool in the front, which essentially has teeth to help chip or chew up vegetation while it passes through an area. So for our project, the overarching goals are to proactively restore forest health, protect the upper watershed, promote long-term carbon storage, and minimize the potential for loss from large or intense wildfires. The project covers 402 acres within the two parks, with 218 acres in Huddart and 184 acres in Wunderlich. And for reference, the Kings Mountain Road Shaded Fuel Break project was 80 acres. The work will be done primarily with mechanical methods like the masticator you saw on the previous slide. And this will be to thin, dense forest stands and understory vegetation. The targets will be mostly understory vegetation and trees less than 8 inches in diameter, and also larger trees that are currently dead or have been and are still standing and have been affected by or impacted by sudden oak death or other just disease. The treatments are planned to minimize impacts to negative environmental effects and to protect the desired biological and cultural resources in the parks. Some previous slides showed a few example images of what post-treatment conditions could look like, but I wanted to highlight a real example from Huddart Park from the work that was done along Kings Mountain Road and the Archery Fire Road. From left to right, the images here show an area near the archery range, the far left being immediately before work began, and then the middle image being around October of 2019 after the work was completed. And then the far right is from February this year, so about 1.5 years after the work was completed. And you can see that there's much more green returning. A lot of what you see growing on the ground are manzanitas, so those desired native species that we want to see grow back. And so I just wanted to highlight that as a good example of how things will look visually over time. Prior to the project starting and throughout the duration of the work, there will be many steps taken to ensure that environmental protection measures are in place. So this includes targeted wildlife surveys before the work occurs, such as red-legged frog surveys, nesting bird surveys, and wood rat nest surveys. Rare plant surveys have also been underway for the past year to identify plants that need to be avoided, such as the Kings Mountain manzanita or Anderson's manzanita. Sensitive resources like nests will be flagged, or these rare plants will be flagged for avoidance before the project. There are several other BMPs or best management practices or measures that will be carried out for the project implementation or after work is completed to minimize or address things like erosion or ground disturbance as well. We also, the goal of the project is to also retain habitat features like downed logs or snag trees, desired native species, and pockets of scrub to continue to provide good wildlife habitat and structure and diversity throughout the park. From a permitting standpoint, the county is utilizing the California Vegetation Treatment Program to do our California Environmental Quality Act compliance for the project. And this outlines all of these environmental protection measures that will guide the work and all of those pertinent details. So some maps to give you an idea of the work areas. So this is the treatment areas for Huddart. What you see with sort of reddish purple hatched areas are where work is planned. And the trails or roads that intersect through these work areas as well. And this is the map for Wunderlich. So again, the purple or yellow hatched areas represent the planned work areas within Wunderlich. And so for the timeline, where we are at right now is that we're working on completing all of the planning and permitting items for the project. And in the coming weeks, the San Mateo Resource Conservation District will be working on securing a contractor to complete the work. And in the weeks prior to the project getting underway, likely in mid-June, all of the pre-project surveys and environmental protection measures will be put in place, and all of the project areas will be flagged and delineated. Implementation is currently planned for the start of July, and will potentially continue through November or beyond if weather conditions allow. Work would not occur if it's too wet, but if we do have some dry periods, it may be feasible to continue work into the wet season. The work will be monitored regularly throughout the implementation, and after completion, county parks will continue periodic project monitoring to observe regrowth or determine if invasive species control is needed, and also determine what other types of long-term maintenance needs to occur. This is just some additional detail on our monitoring and maintenance plans in terms of what will occur during different phases of the project. So things that we'll do prior to the work occurring, things that will be monitored during the project itself, and then things that will be monitored after the project's completed. So what to expect at Huddart and Wunderlich. Since we're a few months away now from the project getting started, I also just wanted to cover what you can all expect out at Huddart and Wunderlich during the project. We'll have to implement periodic trail closures for public safety while work is occurring in certain areas because of the type of equipment that's being used. We hope to be able to phase the project in ways that limit the extent and the need for trail closures at any given time, and be able to keep other areas of the park open for recreation. But this will be necessary and variable for what needs to be closed at any given time. So we'll be very sure to communicate these advisories and these closures in advance of when they're needed. It will also be several months of duration. As I mentioned, it anticipated to start in July and could run through the fall. Certainly there will be some visual change to how you're seeing the forest along the trail sides, like you're probably familiar with after seeing the work done for the Kings Mountain Road project. And there will be noise generated by the equipment that's being used. And so with that, I just wanted to open it up for questions.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I'm not sure if anybody else from county parks that's on the call would like to say anything or weigh in, but we really appreciate everybody joining us. And so, Scott or Nicholas, if there's anything you'd like to add, please feel free to jump in. And if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them.
Yeah, Kim, hey, it's Nicholas. Really quickly, just want to acknowledge the amount of work that Hannah and Dan and the NRM team are doing to see this project through, and how fortunate we are to have them leading this on the department's end, and how lucky to be working with the RCD on this. This project is really going to set the tone for future fuel management and forest health efforts. And we're very excited to see how this, to see this project through and use it as a model going forward. So really excited and fortunate, and appreciate the friends allowing the department to present tonight, and all of your support going forward.
Yeah, Kim, I'd like to reiterate what Nicholas said. The amount of effort and research and planning and documentation that Hannah and Dan and the department has done at this point is exemplary. And it's a continuation of what we've been doing for years in Huddart and Wunderlich. And we're finally going to get an opportunity to really go at it the way it needed to be done. We've always made fuel breaks and done fuel reduction, but this is an opportunity right now for us to set the stage and a precedence and a standard for our parks. So they've done a great job, and we're really hoping once we implement this, it's going to make a huge change. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd also just like to comment too, I hope that this information is helpful for the Friends, as our partners. I'm sure there will be questions that come your way through the project as well. And so I hope this information is helpful to be able to, better relay the project goals and objectives. And you're always, welcome to direct people our way if there are any questions for the project as well.
Well, I know we can take the example of the oak restoration project and sort of, you guys did a great job of helping us be informed, and then that allows us to write newspaper articles and send it out to our email lists, and even just talking to people when we're out on the trails. And we do get lots of questions from park visitors. So this kind of collaborative approach is really, really useful. So I appreciate your time in trying to help us become as educated as we can on the topic. It sounded like somebody had a question, so go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away.
Kim, it's Jill. I was just going to compliment Hannah. Well done. Very clear. And I think we just want to, as a friends group, be available to do whatever we can to help you guys out. I think Kim mentioned all of the education that we can help you with, disseminate the information. I think the maps are brilliant, by the way. And if we can have those available, maybe we can publish some of those in our newsletter coming up, or maybe save that for, actually, we'll have to do it in our spring newsletter, but I think the more information we can get out, the better. So thanks a lot for this, and we look forward to it.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. We'll be able to share much more of this information too. We're about to get some other communications content out to the public soon. So we'll make sure that we're connected with you on that too. And we'd be happy to, utilize your help in getting the word out as well.
Great.
One question that I got on the chat is, do you know the extent of the, or I guess the scope of the work that you're going to be doing? Is it mostly clearing understory and cutting down diseased and dying trees? Or is it much more intensive, I guess, like what we saw with the Kings Mountain project and even with the Wunderlich restoration? Like, how intensive is the clearing going to be?
Yeah, it's not going to be as intensive as the Wunderlich project, where most, the goal was to remove all of the mature eucalyptus. So more or less, the whole, tree stand was removed, and the intent is to replace it with oak woodland over time. It will be more aligned with what the Kings Mountain Road project looked like, and it will be variable in different areas. The goal is everything less than 8 inches in diameter in terms of tree size. So in some locations that might be many of the trees in a stand, but in others it may be fewer. And then it would be like anything that's bigger than that size would only be removed if it's dead.
I'll also mention that according to the permitting documents that we have through the California Vegetation Treatment Plan, treatments within oak woodland areas are somewhat restricted. So we can only treat 20% of the total oak woodland acreage to meet the permit requirements. So most of the project will occur in the mixed evergreens and redwood areas.
Yeah, and also similar to tack onto Dan's comment with things like scrub or chaparral areas, there will be it won't be full removals in those areas. It'll be much more kind of a patchy or mosaic approach. So you'll still see pockets of scrub or chaparral retained and some of it removed. So it'll be a bit more of a mixture in those areas.
Any other questions or comments from anybody? You guys are awfully quiet for this crew.
This has been a really good session. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I wanted to say something on a bigger scale. What about all the private property and Stanford property around here? Are they going to be doing something similar? Are we sharing the information? I mean, how does that work? Because it seems like there's a lot more that needs to be done on private property.
Yeah, there are a few regional collaboration groups that do coordinate and meet and discuss sort of regional efforts or other projects that are occurring on, say, other land management agencies or park agencies, and also like private land as well. Some examples are the Santa Cruz Mountain Stewardship Network or the San Mateo Fire Safe Council are sort of regional, and then there's the Coastal Regional Prioritization Group. So these are regional groups where the intent is to sort of meet with multi-agencies or interested groups that can coordinate and discuss joint efforts or complementary efforts or things like that.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Thanks.
Last call for questions. Everybody's got the 5 o'clock blues, it looks like. All right, well, I really appreciate the amount of time and planning and effort you guys have put into the presentation. And obviously this has been a long-term project that you've been working on for a long while. So it's excellent material for us, and we'll be writing some newsletter articles and happy to help promote any other forums that you're going to host for the public through our channels. And if anybody has questions or wants connections to these guys, you know how to reach me, and I'm happy to forward anything you have to Hannah or Dan or anybody else that can help you out with any information that you need. So I thank everybody for your time, and we'll see you at our next call, I guess. So.
And yeah, just to plug, really quickly, we do have a public webinar planned next week on April 8th at 7 o'clock. And we can share that information if you're able to, point that in the direction of anyone else that might be interested. The content will be similar to what we presented today. So for those who've been on the call, I wouldn't say you'll learn anything necessarily new. But if if you know of anyone else that might be interested in attending, that would be our next opportunity.
Yeah, I'll make sure to share that on our social media and our email listserv so that we can kind of get the public dialogue going. As we experienced with the Wunderlich project, it does so much better if you educate people before you do the work than afterwards.
Yeah, that's true.
Wonderful. All right, well, everybody have a great night, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Thank
Have a
you
good
guys
night.
so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take care.